Milwaukee police have now linked a little boy found wandering the streets to a woman found murdered.
Barefoot and shivering in the early morning cold, a 7-year-old autistic boy wandered Milwaukee's empty streets, drifting beneath streetlights like a ghost no one expected to see. He couldn't speak, couldn't point, couldn't tell officers anything about where he came from or why he was alone. Police fanned out across the neighborhood, knocking on doors, hoping someone recognized him. But every face in every doorway shook their head. No missing child report, no panicked parent, no trace of who this boy belonged to. You're watching the exposed crime. We tell the stories that need to be told. Domestic violence, toxic relationships, and the lives lost behind closed doors. No sugarcoating, no excuses, just the truth. If you're new here, subscribe and join us as we shed light on stories. What none of them knew, not the officers searching, not the neighbors stirring awake, was that the one person he needed most was already gone. His mother, Anya Raymond, had been murdered hours earlier, shot in a car by the landlord who killed her friend, then dumped in an alley and left beneath the cold November sky. And in the final moments before abandoning her child miles away, that same man looked into the boy's silent eyes and told him a lie only a monster could deliver. Wait here for your mama. So he waited, alone, innocent, trusting, standing on a patch of concrete where his mother would never come. At 4 a.m., Milwaukee was the kind of quiet that feels abandoned streetlights humming, windows dark, the whole city holding its breath. That's when the first caller phoned in about a child wandering alone. A small figure, barefoot, pacing slowly along the sidewalk like he was searching for something he couldn't name. When officers arrived, they found him standing near the curb, pajamas thin against the cold, his feet red from the pavement. He didn't cry. He didn't run. He just looked at them with wide, exhausted eyes, like he'd been awake far too long for a child his age. They tried speaking softly to him, crouching down to his level, asking simple questions. What's your name? Where's your mum? Are you hurt? But every question vanished into the silence. The boy didn't talk. He didn't point. He didn't react. It was like he'd retreated into a place only he could reach. Officers exchanged glances, not sure if he was scared, in shock, or simply unable to communicate. They wrapped him in a blanket, but it didn't stop the trembling. The search began immediately. They knocked on doors in the surrounding blocks, waking half-asleep families who blinked at the flashlight beams in their hallways. Nobody recognized him. Nobody was missing a child. The police widened the radius, checking security cameras, asking neighbors if they'd heard anything in argument, a car door, footsteps. Still nothing. The boy's silence made everything harder. With no name, no address, no clues, the officers were forced to rely on instinct. Something was wrong. Children didn't just appear on sidewalks at 4 a.m. Not in this part of town. Not like this. At the station, they photographed him and sent out alerts to nearby districts, hoping a parent would call in panic. Hours passed. Phones rang, but none of the calls were the right one. Mothers with missing teenagers. Fathers reporting stolen cars. Noise, but no answers. The boy sat quietly through it all, staring at the floor like he was waiting for instructions that would never come. Meanwhile, across the city, people were starting their day brewing coffee, warming their cars, rushing to work unaware that a tragedy far worse than a lost child had already taken place. A mother lay dead in an alley, hidden by bushes, her body left in the dark while her son wandered alone. But that discovery was still days away. The city moved on autopilot, blind to the horror tucked into its corners. Officers kept searching, trying to form a picture from nothing. They didn't know his mother had been murdered. They didn't know the killer had abandoned him like an afterthought. They didn't know that every moment the boy stayed silent, he was carrying the weight of something unspeakable. In those early hours, all they had was a nameless child standing in the dark and a mystery no one realized was already soaked in blood. Before her name ever appeared in headlines, before detectives traced a nightmare back to her doorstep, Anya Raymond was simply a mother trying to make it through each day with whatever strength she had left. People who knew her always said the same thing. She walked into a room and made it warmer. She laughed easily, loved fiercely, and carried herself with a confidence that came from surviving more than she ever talked about. Anya didn't complain. She pushed through. That was her way. She was raising 3 kids, including her youngest, a 7-year-old boy who was autistic and nonverbal. Caring for him required patience, routines, gentle hands, and long nights, and she showed up every single time. She was the kind of mother who carried her children in her voice, in her decisions, in the way she moved. Everything she did was for them, even when life gave her more weight than help. Her connection to Terrence Wilder came from that same place, 2 people trying to build something stable in a world that didn't always give them much to work with. Terrence wasn't just someone she stayed with. He was a friend, a protector, someone who understood what it meant to struggle and still smile anyway. They shared dinners, stories, worries. In that upstairs unit near 12th and Capitol, they tried to create a small patch of peace for themselves and their kids. But peace was hard to come by in that house. Terrence had been dealing with broken plumbing, leaking faucets, and the worst of it 2 full months without hot water. Imagine trying to bathe a child, cook, or clean under those conditions. The place was falling apart, and every complaint Terrence made seemed to push the landlord, Kevin Griffin, further into resentment. Griffin lived downstairs, always aware of who came and went, always irritated, always watching. It wasn't supposed to be complicated. Terrence just wanted basic living conditions a landlord is supposed to provide. But Griffin saw every request as a challenge, every report as disrespect. When city inspectors showed up and confirmed exactly what Terrence had been saying, the tension snapped into something sharper. Griffin started the eviction process, claiming Terrence had people living there who weren't on the lease. Maybe he meant Anya. Maybe it didn't matter. Everyone could feel the air getting heavier in that house. Anya kept her head down through it all. She wasn't trying to start trouble. She just needed a safe place to rest her head and raise her child. But living under Kevin Griffin's roof meant walking on a fault line, 1 crack away from disaster, 1 argument away from something irreversible. She couldn't have known that the place she sought shelter in, the home she shared with someone she trusted, would become the last place she ever stood alive. For 2 months, the upstairs unit had been a battlefield of busted pipes, cold baths, and broken promises. No hot water, no repairs, no relief. Terrence kept trying to handle it the right way, asking, reminding, waiting, but nothing changed. You can ignore a leaking faucet for a while, but you can't ignore a landlord who refuses to fix the basics of living. Eventually, he did what any fed-up tenant would do. He called the city. Inspectors came out, walked through the unit, and confirmed everything he'd been saying. The drains were bad. The faucets were leaking. The porch door didn't work. They ordered Kevin Griffin to fix it. Griffin wasn't grateful for the chance to make things right. He was furious. In his mind, Terrence's complaints weren't a cry for help. They were an attack. His pride was bruised, his authority challenged, and instead of picking up a wrench, he picked up anger. He filed eviction threats, muttering about extra people in the unit, about unpaid rent, about rules being broken. But everyone could see the truth. It was retaliation. A punishment for daring to speak up. By November 4th, the tension in that house felt like static in the air. You didn't have to see a storm to know one was coming. Terrence and Anya were upstairs, trying to get through another day, while Griffin stewed downstairs. It didn't take much to push him over the edge, a simple argument about the back door being left open. A door, not rent, not violence, not anything worth raising a hand over, let alone a gun. But Griffin lost it, or at least that's what he claimed later. He grabbed his firearm, marched upstairs, and stepped into Terrence's bedroom. Terrence was in bed, tired, unarmed, unprepared. There was no fight, no struggle, no warning, just a gunshot that ripped through the small room and ended Terrence's life instantly. Anya was right there. Close enough to see the flash, close enough to hear the breath leave Terrence's chest. She froze, the way anyone might when witnessing the unthinkable. And in that terrible moment, she understood exactly what had just happened and what it meant for her. Griffin looked at her, not with panic, not with regret, but with calculation. She had seen everything. She could tell everything. Terrence was dead in his bed. The house was silent, and Anya Raymond, a mother who had only come to find stability, was suddenly standing at the edge of a nightmare she couldn't escape. Griffin had already crossed one line. Now he was ready to cross another. Griffin didn't waste a second after killing Terrence. The shock hadn't even settled in the air when he turned to Anya, gun still warm in his hand, and told her and her son to get up. There was no room for refusal, not with a dead body on the bed and a man willing to create another. Anya gathered her son, her hands shaking so badly she could barely steady his, and Griffin marched them downstairs and out the door. His Mercedes was parked out front, polished and quiet, the kind of car that shouldn't have been anywhere near the kind of horror it was about to hold. He forced them inside, and Ye slid into the passenger seat, her son trembling beside her. Buckle clicks. Door slams. Griffin behind the wheel. The engine hummed to life like nothing was wrong, like they were just going for a drive. But Anya's heart was already racing. She knew what she'd seen. She knew what he was capable of. And she knew deep down, as surely as a mother knows danger, that Griffin wasn't driving them to safety. Fear sat tight in her chest, growing heavier with every mile they drove. Her son clung to her arm, confused, silent, unaware of the nightmare forming around him. Anya scanned the car, her pulse pounding. That's when she remembered her bag inside it, a small can of mace, a pocket knife. Not much. Not enough. But in a moment like this, even hope the size of a blade felt like a lifeline. She waited for a chance, for a curve in the road, for a distraction, and when it came, a brief moment, a flicker of hesitation in Griffin's movements. She acted. She tried. She grabbed the mace, reached for the knife, anything to protect herself, anything to buy even a second for her and her son. But Griffin was faster. Or maybe just colder. He turned toward her, lifted the gun, and fired in the enclosed space of the car. The sound was deafening. And now Anya collapsed against the seat, her son watching, unable to scream, unable to speak, only able to witness the moment his world shattered in front of him. Griffin kept driving. No panic, no mercy, no humanity. He pulled into an alley near 41st and Hampton, dragged Anya's body out of the passenger seat, and left her there among the bushes like she was nothing more than trash he needed to discard.
I looked and I saw the body, and of course, I took off running.
Rosetta Lampkin Johnson and her neighbor discovering a 31-year-old woman dead in their alley near these bushes. Police say she had been shot.
Did you recognize this woman at all?
Not at all.
At any point, did you hear gunshots?
No gunshot at all. To my recognition and stuff like that, she must have been, killed somewhere else and brought here.
Police tell 12 News the little boy is related to the victim. The medical examiner identifying her as Anya Raymond. What happened, though, remains a mystery.
I have sorrow for anyone, especially young, as I think she was 31 or something like that, very young and stuff like that. You don't want to see that or see anything happen to someone like that, and my heart goes out to the family.
Then he closed the door and drove away, her son still in the back seat, still alive, still holding the memory of what he had just seen. He drove the child miles across the city, stopped near 9th and Keefe, and opened the door. The boy stepped out, confused and cold. Griffin looked down at him and delivered a lie. Only a monster could say with a straight face, "Wait here for your mama." Then he drove off, leaving the child alone in the dark waiting for someone who would never return. When officers found the boy wandering alone at 4 a.m., they had no idea how deep the tragedy ran. They brought him into safety, wrapped him in blankets, tried to coax a single word from him, but he stayed silent, locked inside the kind of shock no child should ever hold. They searched for anyone who might know him, anyone missing a child, but every lead went nowhere. For days, the mystery of who he belonged to hung over the department like a storm cloud no one could read. Meanwhile, across the city, Anya Raymond's body lay hidden in an alley near 40 Wants and Hampton. People walked past the bushes without realizing there was a woman lying just feet away. Not until a full week later did a neighbor stumble upon the truther Anya's lifeless body, cold from the November air, robbed of dignity long before anyone found her. Shock rippled through the neighborhood. Who was she? What happened to her? Why was she there? The answers came fast once police traced the boy back to the house on 12th and Capitol. Inside the upstairs unit, they found Terrence Wilder's body still in his bed, exactly where Griffin had left him. 2 murders, 1 home, and a landlord who lived just downstairs. When investigators brought Kevin Griffin in, he didn't fight it, didn't deny it, didn't even flinch. He confessed, almost clinically recounting each killing like it was something that simply happened, not something he chose. Terrence was shot after an argument. Anya was killed because she saw it. The boy was abandoned because, in Griffin's words, she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the families heard those words like blows. Terrence's loved ones broke under the weight of what they learned, how he'd only wanted safe living conditions, how his life was ended over something as small as a door. Anya's mother flew in from Texas, heart already sinking, knowing something was wrong the moment her daughter didn't answer the phone. She had hoped for a miracle. Instead, she found herself planning a funeral and comforting a grandson who could not explain the horrors he had seen. The community erupted in outrage. People questioned how a landlord could let conditions get so bad, how complaints turned into retaliation, how violence brewed beneath the surface until it spilled into irreversible tragedy. It wasn't just the murders, it was the pattern, the neglect, the signs ignored. And in the end, this became more than a crime. It became a warning, a reflection on how quickly everyday frustration can rot into violence when power goes unchecked, a reminder of how fragile safety truly is, and a plea for justice not just in the courtroom, but in the systems meant to protect people like Terrence, like Anya, and like the child who survived what no child should ever witness. Rest in peace, Anya Raymond. Rest in peace, Terrence Wilder. Your lives mattered. Your stories mattered. Your stories matter. And we will not forget you. If this story reached you, if it stirred something in your chest, don't let it fade when the video ends. These cases remind us that danger can hide in the everyday, that silence can cost lives, and that sometimes the smallest voice can be the one that saves someone. If you know anybody in a violent or unsafe situation, don't wait. Say something. Call for help. Speak up. Your voice might be the one thing standing between someone and a tragedy like this. Drop a comment. Share this video. Keep their names alive. And we'll be back with another story that needs to be told. This is the Exposed Crime. Stay safe out there.